So now let's move on to the second element, the key skills that you need to have or master in order to be able to do TI successfully.
I would say that the key skill is a consecutive interpreting with note taking. And by consecutive interpreting, I don't mean, one sentence, two sentences. I mean 3, 4, 5 sentences, or sometimes a chunk of speech that's 1 minute long. And the ability to note down the key information, use your short-term memory skills, your recollection skills, and then create on the basis of your notes to create a fluent utterance in the target language. And this is something that can be a bit challenging because we don't always use long consecutive in face-to-face settings, but in telephone interpreting, it's absolutely the only possible way of doing things, so that the conversation flows and that the exchange of information is going well. Because sometimes it's necessary to let someone talk for a longer period of time. For example, if a doctor is explaining the treatment, or if someone is explaining their situation with the background, it just makes more sense to listen and take in the whole thing and then recreate it in English or Polish, like in my case. And note-taking skills are something you're going to probably work, your entire life, because it's something that grows. It's something that is a skill that needs to be, enhanced and fortified. The element of note-taking skills is your system of symbols and shortcuts, abbreviations that you're going to use. And the internet is fantastic for that, because you can actually go on websites and look at people's symbols. There are a few websites where you can actually find a cache or like a treasury of different symbols. You can create your own, and that's like a system that you should be, if you haven't started, you should consider creating for yourself. It's a very personal thing. So for example, I would use symbols that make sense for me, might not necessarily make sense for someone else, but it's absolutely essential to, whichever way you want to do it, to have that skill in place. Also, always have a pen and paper, or in my case, I don't use paper because I don't want to like keep having to shred it. So I use like a disappearing writing pad. You can buy them quite cheaply on the internet. I think the prices start from like just a couple of pounds. And if I need to note something down, and you will need to note things down, for example, things like dates, names, especially if someone has an unusual name, or if you have to spell the name, that will be very, very important to have at hand. Names of medications, lists of symptoms, lists of instructions, registration numbers of vehicles, place names, um, um, postcodes, addresses. All this you will have to write down, because our memory is not very good with random numbers and just random bits of information. And it's sometimes it's absolutely, well, essential to make sure you've got them down properly. Another element is to be able to use a spelling system. So for English speakers, I use NATO phonetic alphabet. There is a British version and there is an American version, which is slightly different, just depending on where you work. But it's very, very important to have that down absolutely pat, so you can spell things, especially since the connection might not always be great. And using ABC is an absolute no-no. It doesn't work. From my own practice, I can share with you that for Polish speakers, I use Polish names. So instead of saying B for Bravo, I would say B for Barbara, or A for Anna, or K for Krzysztof, because these are very well-known names, and even if there are, you know, slight disturbances on the line, some, you know, some background noise, people will hear them well. And I always ask my clients to spell something that's not immediately obvious using those Polish names. For spelling things, make sure that you've got a reliable system that works for your, you know, for your language audience. So, you know, it could be names, it could be place names. But like for Polish speakers, it's given names. That's a really good system. And again, before you start work, you know, make sure you've got your notepads, your LCD writing pads, or whichever materials and means you use for making notes, that you've got them at hand. And, you know, even if it's something really, you know, obvious, even if it's something that you've heard multiple times, I would still encourage to make notes whenever you can, whenever it's sustainable, because sometimes, you know, all you need is a knock on the door, or, you know, one of your children coming in, or your pet, or, you know, something happening, and then you break that concentration and you might lose that key information. And it's just easier to pick up just by asking someone to repeat one element rather than get through the whole thing again. So just to, you know, sum up, note-taking skills and consecutive interpreting skills are absolutely essential. And you will also find that it will enhance your face-to-face skills as well, because, you know, those skills are transferable. And I definitely think that this is, you know, something that's really worth investing your time and money into.